What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who ranking video. Today I'm finally going to be ranking the Series 12 episodes. It's been so long since Series 12 aired. It's taken me a hell of a long time to finally get around to doing this ranking. I was going to rewatch through Series 12, but I've kind of been watching a lot of other things recently, not watching as much Doctor Who on the whole, and I really just don't feel like re-watching Series 12 at this current point in time, but I feel like I've really got to get this ranking done. So I put together my top 10, and I think that's pretty much where it is going to stay anyway after a rewatch. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this video today so that it's finally done and out of the way, because I know there has been a few people asking for it. So first of all, remember that this is my personal ranking, so it is my own opinion. I'd love to hear what your ranking is in the comments down below, but remember, respect my opinion, I'll respect yours, respect everybody else's in the comments, and then we're all one big happy family. So anyway, let's get started. Number 10, Orphan 55. Now, this is probably not a massive surprise to most people, having Orphan 55 at the bottom spot on this list. It's an episode that I think actually had some decent potential, but really wasn't good. First of all, the design of the monsters I just don't really like. I think they look quite cheap and a little bit shit. You've got the awful character, I can't even remember her name now, it's like Velma or something. She keeps screaming Benny all the time, and she's the worst actress ever and really annoying. You've then got the rest of the characters in this, which aren't anything to write home about either. And then on top of all that, the message that gets rammed down your throat at the end of this episode, that this is what humankind will become if we keep treating the planet the way that it is and don't recycle and do this and do that. And it's a decent enough message, but the way they kind of ram it down our throats, it's just too much. That the final scene in this episode especially is just, it's just awful. Number 9. Can You Hear Me? Here's one that might be a little bit more controversial. This one seemed to split the fandom a little bit. For me, I just didn't really like it. I was really excited when, I heard about this whole thing of there's going to be like an animation aspect to this episode, and I really liked that part. That part was definitely the standout part of the episode, but the rest of it I really didn't like. Zelen as the main villain of this story, apparently that guy's a great actor. In this one, he just doesn't really work for me. He's a bit too creepy and weird. He's alright now and again, but I just don't really like the direction his character took. Basically, he kind of shows people their biggest fears and ends up killing them. I don't know, the story just feels like a bit of a mess. I just really don't like where everything was going in this one. I think this was the episode where we got to see a bit more backstory of Yaz, if I'm not mistaken, but even then, this story it's just a mess, really. Number 8, Praxis. Here's another episode that I think had a lot of potential, and I was really excited at the start. I mean, this is one of the best starts to an episode, in my opinion, of this series. I love how the companions are kind of split up into groups. We're seeing them in different places, investigating different things. It gives us some great moments with these characters. I think Graham and Yaz are together here. It's awesome seeing them together, having a bit of a bonding thing. So we haven't seen a whole lot of that prior to this. And then I think you've got Ryan and finds some random woman, and then the Doctor's elsewhere as well. So there's a lot going on at the start, and it really is an interesting start to the episode, but the rest of it just kind of drags and gets a little bit silly and stupid. Basically, whole episode's about this bird's acting weirdly and aggressive, don't know what's going on. There's this kind of bacteria virus that's infecting people, and they like get covered in scales and then blow up, and they're trying to figure that out. And then throughout the whole episode, it just kind of goes from being pretty good at the start to just kind of getting a bit boring, and then just, I don't know, just not that interesting and just fairly dull towards the end. Number 7, Spyfall Part 2. Now, after Part 1, I was really looking forward to Part 2. Part 1 left on such a good cliffhanger, and I really liked the episode. But then Part 2 came along, and I mean, I don't hate it. I do not hate it. I think it's a relatively decent episode. It's kind of just average for me, like a 7.5 out of 10. I think it really didn't build off the first part. The whole thing with Daniel Barton, I just found to be boring and just not interesting at all. The Kasavan kind of took a back seat for the Master, and yes, it was really good to see Sacha Dhawan as the Master, doing his Master stuff, and frankly being brilliant in the process. But I just feel like the rest of the story kind of got forgotten about a bit and left to the side. When we did come back to it, I just didn't really care for it. You also had the stuff with like Ava Lovelace and that, which was fine, but I wasn't really that invested in it. And yeah, altogether, the Spyfall Part 2 is not a bad episode by any means, but I just don't think it really gets to the high that Part 1 did for me. Number 6. The Timeless Children. Now this one is probably the episode that I'm most kind of not sure about where I should really place it. I've put it in 6 because here's the thing. I really don't like at all the whole thing with the Doctor not actually being from Gallifrey. I just don't like it. I don't hate it as much as I thought I would, to be honest. Just because I think the way they went about showing it, and crazily the pacing of this episode, which is crazy to me because the pacing of Chibnall Zero so far, I just don't like the pacing of the episodes. This is the one episode that I think is actually pretty well paced. I like the pacing of this episode, and that's really the reason why it gets as high as it does, because although I don't like the whole Timeless Children arc, I think what they did with it, it's actually done really well, and that puts it in a really awkward spot because I don't like the actual story and what's happening. I do quite like what they're doing with the Cyberman and what the Master's doing here with the Cyberman and Gallifrey, but I just don't like the whole Timeless Doctor being the Timeless Child thing, so because of that, just kind of sits somewhere in the middle. Number 5. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Now this is one when I first watched it, I really did quite enjoy it, and I mean I haven't watched it again since, but I think I would enjoy it next time as well. It was one of those episodes though where at the time people did seem to enjoy it, but now it doesn't seem to be as highly rated as I thought it would be, as it was before, but at this current point in time, I'm putting it in 5th place. I think the guy who played Nikola Tesla was great. You also had I can't remember what his name is, but you also had other historical characters in there. I like the historical element of it. The villain of the Shakrith or whatever it was called, I can't remember. She was fine. She was okay, nothing special, but I think there's a few decent moments for the companions here, and generally it is one of the better paced episodes in my opinion of this series, and just I didn't really know anything about Nikola Tesla before this, and it gave me a bit of insight into who he was, so yeah, I did quite enjoy this. Number 4. Ascension of the Cyberman. Now this is an episode that I actually quite highly praised when I first watched it. I haven't watched it again since, but I do think, just thinking about it in my head, I wouldn't like it as much rewatching it. I really like what they did with the Cybermen here. I loved Ashad, the lone Cyberman. He was so good having that lead Cyberman role, and I like the other Cybermen as well here. The moment where, like, you know, Graham and all that were hiding in the cyber suits was amazing, and the atmosphere in this episode is really good, and I like what the Master does here too. My main issue with this episode is the pacing, but not necessarily because of slow pacing this time, but because of a bit all over the place pacing. You go from the Doctor doing her thing with the Master and that, and then you go to the Cybermen and Ryan and all that, and then you go to these other humans doing their own thing, and then you go to this completely separate story of Brendan, this guy who seems to be a Time Lord, but we don't really understand who he is, and even at the end, I don't think we actually definitively know who he is. I think the idea is that he is actually the Doctor, but don't really get a definitive answer of that, so a little bit all over the place with that bit, but yeah, it is still a pretty good episode. Number 3. Spyfall Part 1. So here we have the first part of Spyfall, quite a way up from the second part. I just really enjoyed this episode. Doctor Who was back on our screens again. I thought this episode was just generally quite exciting after having all of Series 11 not really having a, you know, big, bombastic, crazy episode. Not even the finale was like that in the last series. Spyfall Part 1 seemed to be building up to this big, almost finale, but this time it was the introduction to the series. So yeah, it was just a really cool episode. I mean, it was awesome seeing Sacha Dhawan in Doctor Who. Of course, not the Master at first, but then right at the end, that reveal is so good. Honestly, it might be my favourite Master reveal. It honestly might be. I really loved it, and I didn't see it coming at all. I had no idea. And yeah, the whole cast is on top form in this one, and yeah, really not a whole lot bad to say about it. Number 2. Fugitive of the Jadoon. So it was kind of difficult for me to decide which episode I wanted in first and which one in second. I've ended up putting Fugitive of the Jadoon in second though. I think this was a really good episode. I mean, firstly, it was awesome to see the Jadoon back. We of course had Captain Jack returning. That was amazing. Awesome to see him back in the little appearance that he had. Companions were on top form. The Doctor was on top form. You of course had this other Doctor that we just randomly meet. It's like, who the hell is this? I think this episode is slightly let down for me because of the Timeless Children and what ends up happening there. And also with the fact that we find out that this Doctor is actually the Doctor, from what we understand, before William Hartnell, the first Doctor, but she has a police box TARDIS? That doesn't really make sense. But anyway, continuity, Doctor Who doesn't really exist in a whole lot of ways. But yeah, I do think it is still quite a good episode, and I definitely would like to watch it again soon. Number 1, The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Now, this episode is really good. I just really love the atmosphere of kind of like a haunted house, a spooky house. You've got the lone Cyberman, who of course we heard from Fugitive of the Jadoon. Captain Jack said, don't give the lone Cyberman what it wants. We're like, what is this going to be? And then in Haunting of Villa Diodati, we get the lone Cyberman, and he is great in this episode. He is so good. Building up for the 2-part finale, of course. This is almost like a 3-part finale, but I do count the Haunting of Villa Diodati as kind of its own separate thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a really great episode. The only real issue I have with this one is, and it's a very minor issue, there's at one point where Graham like sees some people, but they're not actually real. I don't 100% understand. We don't really ever get a kind of an idea of what that was and what's going on there. Other than that though, pretty minor detail. It's a solid episode. So there we have it. That is my ranking of all the series 12 episodes. What is your ranking? Please let me know down below. Remember, this was my own opinion, so I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below too. And yeah, let's just have a nice discussion about it in the comments. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.